Today for our Sunday Moravian text reading, we are in the Psalms. Psalm 95 verse 1 to 7a. That A just means the first part of the verse, verse 7. Now the great Baptist preacher Charles Spurgeon, he said of this psalm, Psalm 95, that like the ringing of church bells, this psalm is an invitation to worship. And that's simply what I want to invite you into this day, this Sunday. I want to call you this day and throughout the whole of this day to worship Jesus, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I love the diversity of what worship looks like just in this psalm. Singing for joy, shouting aloud, thanksgiving, thanking God for all that he's done for us, using music, using song. And we've got so many modern technology tools to help us do that, like YouTube, haven't we? Kneeling before him, bowing before him, that physical posture that acknowledges Christ's kingship and supremacy. It's an act of making Jesus Lord that you might want to use today. Or what about as we read in that little middle section, verses 3 to 5, what about just considering creation, the mountain peaks, the oceans? These things can inspire worship. Now, as you hopefully know, I often use that word reflex. A reflex response, if you're poked in the eye, you blink. If you're tapped on the knee with one of those little hammers, the knee swings. It's automatic. It is natural. And this is how God has made us and wired us, because that is exactly what worship is. Worship is the reflex response to revelation. Worship is a reflex to seeing afresh who God is, beholding him, catching a fresh glimpse of our God, seeing the beauty and splendour of creation, seeing a sunset or the birth of a child or the vastness of the ocean, or being filled with awe and wonder and just being like, wow, God, you are amazing. That's worship. The psalmist is calling us to worship, but he's also provoking us to worship. He's poking us in the eye with reminding us of creation, but more than that, by reminding us that this same creator God is our shepherd, and that we are the sheep of his pasture. We belong to him. He watches over us and cares for us. And as we see that, as we consider that, well, I don't know about you, but my heart is filled with gratitude and our mouths are filled with thanksgiving. We reflex with worship. The last two of our online gatherings, we've talked about the power of preaching the gospel to ourselves, gospeling ourselves, finding ways to remind ourselves of what Jesus did for us on the cross, how the precious Son of God, the perfect Son of God, came to this earth. He took on flesh and blood simply so that flesh and blood could be slaughtered as a sacrifice for your sin, for my sin. Wow. I don't know about you, but even now, just saying that, considering that, it stirs up something inside. That's the reflex of worship. Now, we were talking about preaching the gospel to ourselves because it's key in becoming confident in sharing the gospel with others, with those who don't yet know Jesus. But let me tell you, in those times we're not feeling like worship, when we don't feel like worship, I believe there's nothing more powerful than to remind ourselves, to preach to our souls what Jesus has done for us on the cross, to behold him there. And as we do, we reflex with worship, to consider how he bore the weight of our sin upon himself, how the wrath and the anger of God was poured out upon Jesus, how because of that we the guilty go free, how death was crushed to death, and how life is now ours abundantly and eternally. Wow. Church, let's worship him this day. Amen.